Yeah, okay, so we got a little bit of a late start, but let us jump right into it. We're still talking about Beina Shmashos, Twilight. Twilight, we're talking about Friday afternoon, what you can and cannot do. So we spoke about Rabbeinu Tam. Some people take in Shabbos. Everybody takes in Shabbos at the same time. The Hungarians used to take in Shabbos an hour after everybody else did, because they held like Rabbeinu Tam, his understanding of when is sunset, when is nightfall. He holds that sunset really, the twilight period from sunset to nightfall is the last 13 and a half minutes of, it's like the 13 and a half minutes right before nightfall. While we hold, it's much shorter than that. Nightfall, from sunset to nightfall is much shorter. Whatever. We hold, it's about an hour later. So many Jews, everybody takes in Shabbos at the same time. But some people are machmir, they're stringent to take out Shabbos later. Yeah, they'll hold like Rabbeinu Tam, so everything gets pushed off about an hour later. They take out Shabbos maybe 40 minutes later, depending on where you are in the world. Okay, whatever. That's fine. What can you or can't you do? Can you ever rely on Rabbeinu Tam's shkia, on Rabbeinu Tam's sunset to do a certain work? So here we take in Shabbos, let's just keep it simple over here. We take in Shabbos 8:45 p.m. It's much later than everybody else. And at about 9 o'clock, 9:10, 9:05, whatever, Shabbos comes in. Well, Rabbeinu Tam would hold that you have at least probably until about 9:45 until Shabbos starts to come in. So can I ever rely on his opinion to do certain works, to do certain malachot? Whenever, this is a very important idea in halacha, in Jewish law. People, have stringencies, or they're extra stringent about something. Maybe I don't eat this type of food. What's an example? I don't know. An example. What's an example that some people do and some people do not do? I don't know. I can't think of anything for whatever reason.
Isn't there a disagreement on artichokes?
Because of bugs? Bugs, is that what you're saying? Bug? I know broccoli. Well, there's
I heard some people are weird about artichokes and they have to be prepped exactly a certain way because of
Oh, okay, that could be. Okay, that could be. I know. You just remind me. My father. Anytime someone says artichokes, my father always says he may choke Artie, but he's not going to choke me. I don't know. I'm not sure. I've never heard a thing about artichokes. The rabbi's learning right now. I would ask him, but I'm not sure. Okay, so here, Yitzchak wrote Chabad Shchita. Okay, yeah, fine. Okay, so let's go with that. So when you want to slaughter an animal, certain animals require you to check the blade each time. If you want to check if you want to slaughter a big animal like a cow, yeah, you want to have hamburgers, you want to slaughter a cow. So there's a halacha that says you should check the knife to make sure that it's sharp, or sharpen it between each slaughter. However, when it comes to a chicken, I believe, I'm pretty certain about this, you do not have to do that. You can do it at once every 10 chickens, because the chicken's neck is not it's not as hard, or it's not going to get chipped, right? The blade of a knife has to be perfect sharp, very sharp, and it can't have any nicks or cracks in it. Otherwise, it's a puzzle shchita. It's an invalid shechting. However, when it comes to chicken, you could do every 5 or 10. However, there's an opinion that says you should still check it between every single chicken. So, if a person comes and says, okay, so most people, let's say, don't hold, most companies that give their hashgacha, that give their stamp of approval that this is kosher, it's called a mashgiach or hashgacha, they hold that it doesn't have to be checked between every chicken. That would hold up production tremendously. However, you could say, no, I want to be stringent, and I want to, I'm only going to eat chicken that is slaughtered, that the knife is checked between each chicken. You can hold that. What can't you do? What can't you say? You can't say something like, I want it to be checked for 15 minutes before each chicken. I want the knife to be checked for 15 minutes for each chicken. You made up a stringency. And because it has no basis in law, there's no opinion. There's no opinion. You're not basing it on any opinion. You're not allowed to do that. That's like a big no-no. People do that. They add on, people who don't know halacha very often, they add on stringencies because they're unsure. They add on stringencies. And the problem is they're making them up. And it's a big problem. You can't do that in Jewish law. You have to have an opinion. It has to be a written opinion for you to accept it as a custom. The exception to that rule is on Pesach. Pesach, everybody can make up their own opinion. Shulchan Aruch says itself. You can make up whatever stringency you'd like. That's why people have crazy, weird stringencies, which we spoke about right before Pesach. So, over here you have a guy, Rabbeinu. Yeah, you have a guy. You have a big, big posek. Obviously, tremendous tzaddik, Rabbeinu Tam, and he holds that Shkia, sunset, is much later than what everybody else holds. So, can I rely on that opinion for certain situations? In Chabad, the answer is clearly no. You cannot do that. But according to Moshe Feinstein, and so therefore there are other people who hold that, he says it is okay. And the reason is, for certain things, which we'll talk about in a moment, and the reason being is there's a concept called Svek Sveka. Svek Sveka means when you have two doubts about what the proper law should be, and I'll give an example in a moment, we go lenient. So over here, we have two doubts as to when the proper shkia, when the proper sunset is. When is twilight, I should say. When is twilight? We have we have two doubts. One is we don't know, right? We brought two Gemaras, two Talmuds that said seemingly contradictory things of how long twilight is. One says it's 18 minutes. The other one says it's really 58.5 minutes. So that's one doubt. And the other doubt is, what's the other doubt? 1 second. Forgot already. I'm already like forgetting. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. 1 second. Already like forgetting. Oh, what is the status of twilight? What is twilight? Is twilight considered part of the previous day, or is it the next day? So how long is it? When does it start? When does it end? And what is its status? And therefore, when you have this double doubt, sveka, which is a very common term in halacha, we tend to be a little more lenient. So Reb Moshe Feinstein has different opinions when it comes to certain prohibitions. For example, if you have to, if you're in a car and you're driving in a car that is, if you're driving in a car and it's right before Shabbos, the Shabbos is about to come in, and you're in a bad area, let's say, you for sure can get out of you can for sure keep driving. What else does he say? He says a few items over here. I apologize. Whatever. Basically, when I learned this, I was like, okay, Chabad says no, so that's the end of it. What else could you do? I believe you can light a candle. I don't know. Whatever. But you're talking to me and you can't do it. So just know there are some opinions, and most people don't hold this way. His son-in-law, I believe, argues with him and says you cannot do that. You cannot rely on it. However, what can you do? Apologize. What can you do during this period of Bein Hashmashas of twilight? There's a few things you could do. For example, anytime there's going to be a tremendous loss, monetary loss, or you can have some sort of distress, you could go ahead and ask a non-Jew to help you in the case of something happening at twilight. For example, let's say you didn't light you have a yard site and you didn't light a candle, and it's still twilight. You still have about 30 minutes from when sunset until nightfall happens, and you didn't light a candle. You could straight up ask a non-Jew to light a yard site candle for you because you'll be distressed about it. Another thing you could do, according to Chabad, or Ktsaisa Shulchan brings it down, you can ask a non-Jew to light candles for you. You can light Shabbos candles. And there's a big question, though. Can I say the bracha? Can I say the blessing? So can I say the blessing over the candles if a non-Jew is the one lighting it for me? So says the Alter Rebbe Paskins, the Alter Rebbe writes, at least when it seems at first, is that you cannot say the blessing over the candles. because you've made a non-Jew your emissary, called a shliach. And whenever a shliach does something for you, they are the ones that need to make the blessing. So if I have a, for example, you can technically have a, the rabbi loves to bring this one down. You can technically have a shliach, an emissary, stand in under the chuppah for you, get married for you. Yeah. So I could have sent my friend to stand under the chuppah while I watched the football game on Sunday, and therefore any blessing that would needed to be said, he could say it for me on my behalf. In fact, he has to be the one that does it. So over here, seemingly, over here in this case, I have my wife, let's say she got her non-Jewish neighbor to come and light the candles, Shabbos candles. So the non-Jewish neighbor would need to make the blessing. Well, no, she couldn't, because there's actually a concept that a non-Jew cannot be a shliach for you, because they can't be the emissary for you, because they have to have the obligation has to be available for them as well. In other words, they don't have to have an obligation, but they have the possibility to fulfill the obligation. In other words, they have to. I couldn't get a child to necessarily do it. But since a non-Jew doesn't have the obligation, it's not even in the world of possibility, therefore, they don't make the blessing. And therefore, nobody makes the blessing, according to the Alter Rebbe. However, the Ketzos HaShulchan commentator, clarifier of the Alter Rebbe, he says that you would make the blessing still. So in this case, let's say my wife forgot to do it. Shabbos, now it's twilight time. I can go ahead to my neighbor across the street, Rahim, that's his name, great guy. Ask him. We've asked him to do many things for us. It's been great. He comes over and he lights the candles for my wife. My wife can make the blessing. Why? Because the blessing is not on the actual lighting of the candles. The mitzvah is not to light the candles. The mitzvah is to have candles lit. There should be light in the home. Remember we spoke about earlier. What if you don't have any candles? Could you just fulfill your obligation of bringing light into Shabbos by just flipping on a light switch? And the answer was yes, you could do that, especially if you're in a hospital, if you're in a hotel room where you're not allowed to light a candle. So there's you should flip on a candle. Flip on the light in the room. Some opinions say you should make a blessing. So in Chabad, we don't make the blessing. We don't make a blessing if you just flip on a light for Shabbos. And in this case, though, you actually have a candle. So the Ketzos HaShulchan writes that you should make a blessing, because it's different than turning on a light switch in your room. And the reason why is because most hold that turning on the light switch, in general, electricity on Shabbos or turning on a light bulb on Shabbos is a rabbinical prohibition, especially if it's an LED light, because it doesn't produce heat. So therefore, it's further removed from the actual mitzvah of lighting a candle, which is fire. So we're a little bit lax. We don't say the same blessings that we would normally say. However, when it comes to having a candle lit by a non-Jew, you would say a blessing, because you're really getting the obligation done. However, he changes the nusach, he changes the wording of what the mitzvah you should, the bracha you should say, and it should be madlikin neiros. So Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kitashanu b'mitzvah v'sav tzivanu, but madlikin neiros. In other words, as opposed to lahadlik ner shel Shabbos kodesh. He changes the line a little bit. I'm not exactly sure we would do that. Let's ask the rabbi. I don't know if I've never heard anybody. I guess I've never seen it done. I've never seen this done, so I don't know if we actually say that. But seemingly you would. You could definitely get away with it. Whatever. If it ever comes to be a situation, let me know, and I don't know how you're gonna let me know, but madlika neros is the way that you would say it. Okay, that's another thing you do. What's another case that you can get a non-Jew to do something for you? Let's say you're driving in an Uber, and then you have a non-Jewish driver, and it's you're heading home, and it's already pretty late. That's it. You're in twilight. So what could you do? What should you do? It's twilight. It's not actually. It's not exactly nightfall yet. You have a non-Jewish driver, so seemingly you could stay in the car if you're going to have a lot of distress, and you for sure know that the driver's not Jewish, could stay in the car and get out where you need to. The problem is an issue that you're going to run into is that you have muksa in your hand, right? Remember muksa? I guess we spoke about muksa. There's certain things you're not allowed to move on Shabbos because it's not in the spirit of Shabbos. So one of them being a cell phone. You can't just carry on a cell phone on Shabbos. How are you going to pay this guy? So let's say you have a pocketbook, yeah? Let's say you have a pocketbook or a backpack, and inside the problem is when you as soon as you step out of the car, you're gonna have a problem of muksa. So one of the ways around muksa is something called a buses. Okay, let me explain what this is. On Shabbos, this is very important. If you light your candles, Shabbos candles, on your Shabbos table, the table itself, and all you have is your Shabbos candles, the table itself becomes a base, a basis for the candles. And therefore, you're not allowed to move. You're not allowed to do anything on that table. The whole table then becomes, because the whole table becomes muksa on Shabbos. Why? Because the whole table's purpose now is to hold up the candles. It has no other purpose. We consider it as if it's like that's its whole purpose. So what do you see people do? There's a few ways around that. If you light candles on your Shabbos table, nowadays people don't really do it. But if you live in an apartment where you don't have much space, this is really where you see it a lot. People who have an apartment, live in an apartment. What they do is you could do one of a few things. You could either put it on a tray, and on the tray you can put a siddur, and you can. So what happens is if you put a siddur is not muksa. A siddur or a book or anything that's not muksa, you can put it on the table, and then therefore the table becomes a base for both something muksa and for something not muksa, and therefore it becomes like parv again, so to speak. So what happens? So, and what you should make sure you do on Shabbos is that you should make sure you have, if you light your candle straight on your table, you should either have a siddur on the table, or you should have a lot of people have the challah, the challah board, or a challah, some challahs on the table, and therefore the table itself is okay. A lot of people put a tray. They'll put a tray on, and then therefore you can actually move the tray. Right, so the candles and the siddur and everything will be on the tray, and you can move the tray. But best not to actually have the candles on the table. So in this case over here, let's say you have a pocketbook, and in the pocketbook you got a lot of money, and you got things that are muksa, money, phones, You should put something that's not muksa on there, inside of there. I don't know what you would have, but whatever. So the pocketbook then is not solely for the purpose of carrying muksa. And you can actually hand your pocketbook. Let's say you have to pay cash, so you can actually hand the pocketbook to the man and say, please take the cash out yourself, because you can't actually take the cash out, but he could do it. And I've seen this done, by the way. Somebody came in late. I remember back in North Carolina, somebody came, the rabbi's son came late in the taxi, and he arrived at the house, and it was like 30 seconds before Shabbos. I don't know how we determined it was 30 seconds before Shabbos, but he couldn't. He was afraid that he would hold on to the money too long, and the taxi driver wouldn't take it. So he dropped it on the ground. All the cash he had, he just dropped it on the ground, and he asked the driver, "I'm sorry, but can you like pick up what you need?" The guy picked up like a 50, I remember, and it was really only like $20, and it was a bit of a there was a big protest. He's like, well, I was just trying to take a tip, whatever. Anyway, you let him take it. And I guess in the case of let's say you have your phone, you have Uber, and you need him to press something, I guess you have him press the button. I don't know, whatever button he has to press, you can get him to press the button. I don't know, yeah, ask a Rav in that situation. So here we go. So we have this. You're allowed to get a non-Jew to light candles for you, if it's a Shabbos need. So if you need to carry something, and it's in this period of time, you can ask a non-Jew outright to do it. What about in the case of, very interesting, what about in the case of what if you take in Shabbos early? What if you yourself decide to take in Shabbos early? We spoke about if you daven mincha, if you pray mincha before the plag, you could daven Mariv after the plag on Shabbos, right? Plag and Mincha, when we spoke about plag and Mincha. So people take in Shabbos earlier. It's about an hour and a quarter before Shabbos normally comes in. You can take in Shabbos that early. So if you took in Shabbos early, but somebody in your house didn't, can they do work for you outright, even though you took in Shabbos? So the answer is yes and no. So the answer could be yes, provided the community is not taking in Shabbos early. So in our situation here in West Bloomfield, where we live, the community davens early. The community takes on Shabbos an hour and a quarter before, the normal, everybody else takes in Shabbos. Why? Because over here, Shabbos comes in very late. We won't start our meal till 9:15 at night. So we try to do it as early as we can. But let's say, so in that situation, if I take in Shabbos early, my wife really should not be, even though she doesn't have to light candles for another hour and 15 minutes after I've decided to take in Shabbos early, she should not do any work for me because I've taken in Shabbos early and the community has taken Shabbos in early. However, what if I was the only one that took Shabbos in early, which happens? Yeah, if let's say, whatever, it's a situation when it happens. I'm having guests over my house who don't normally keep Shabbos, and they don't want to start too late. So I personally will take in Shabbos early before my community does, so I can start the meal early because they have kids or whatever it is, and I want to make a good impression and I want them to experience Shabbos. Now, in that situation, if I'm the only one taking in Shabbos in early, I can outright ask my neighbor, the Kleinmans, to please come and light candles for me and continue cooking Shabbos for me and all the different things, even though I've already taken Shabbos for the next, I've already been keeping Shabbos for 40 minutes. They can come in, imagine sitting at a table and we're having our Shabbos meal, and I ask my non-Jewish neighbor to come help clean up, wash the dishes, and light candles for me and do all these different things. They would think I'm a baller. My maids I got frum maids, don't do that. You shouldn't really do that. But you could do that in that situation. That is something you can do. What else can I tell you? Now, one thing that I do want to mention that's very important. What you want to keep your food warm for Shabbos. Yeah, we made chicken soup. We don't normally make chicken soup in our house. I don't know why. We just don't normally do it because it fills you up, and I want to eat other foods, and I like eating salads and meat and stuff. But my daughter wanted chicken soup, so my wife made chicken soup. So we had chicken soup. And what's the problem with chicken soup? You have to turn off the fire. We turn off the fire right before Shabbos begins, but we want to keep it warm. So what do? You do something called hatmana. Hatmana means when you insulate, you try to insulate. Yeah, you put towels around it, so you try to stop the emission of heat emission, so that it'll stay warm. Now, you cannot do that on Shabbos. You're not allowed to try to insulate something on Shabbos, because it looks like cooking. Nira kimavashal. It looks like cooking. However, in the case, let's say you lit candles already, and it's twilight. You could, and you forgot to put candles. You forgot to do hatmana. You forgot to put towels around the pot. You can go ahead and do that. Called hatmana. You can go ahead and do that. Okay, I'm gonna have to stop here. I apologize for starting a little bit late. Anybody have any questions? So just to recap, there are certain things you're allowed to do during that twilight period. What? Sorry. What were you gonna say? Say no.
Yeah, about the siddur, like we are allowed to light candles above the siddur.
Above the siddur? Not. I mean, you don't want to put the siddur needs to be next to the candles on the table. Don't put candles on top of the siddur. Yeah. It just needs to be on the table. Yeah. It's very important. That's very, very important, because you cannot sit at your table if all you did was light candles at your table, and that's all there is on the table when Shabbos commences. You're not allowed to use that table. A table is not considered a bussy, so it's very important to not do that. Just a very a little bit of a morbid situation, by the way. Muksa itself, the concept of muksa, not moving things, is from the rabbis. Right? It's rabbinical. So whenever the rabbis made a decree, a decree, they always made an exception to the rule, so that we will know that this is from the rabbis and it's not from the Torah. They're not adding any new rule. They're not adding mitzvahs. What if somebody, God forbid, passes away on Shabbos? So, hopefully none of us will have to know this, but somebody passes away, you have to put the body on the floor. Okay, whatever. We don't keep them in a bed or whatever it is. Put the body on the floor and we cover them. What do we have to move the body from the bed to the floor? You actually put a sitter on top of the body, because then the body becomes a base, so to speak, for the sitter, and then you can move the body. Sometimes it could be important to know that. I just want to mention one thing. One time, we traveled on Passover. Chabad students go across the world to little villages or wherever, Thailand, South America, whatever, and they have to run the Pesach Seder. They run a Pesach Seder over there. So one time I went with my group. We split up, and two guys. Everybody comes back and they tell funny stories after the like. There's always some crazy story that happens because you're in this middle of village nowhere. In our case, it was Ukraine. So these guys, they come back and they said, "You won't believe it," but right when we got there, they said, "Oh, Rabbi, we've been waiting." I think I've told you guys this before. We've been waiting. It's unbelievable because somebody in our community passed away yesterday, and we need you to do the burial. Now, these two guys have never done a burial. They don't know anything about doing a burial, and it was right before Pesach was coming in. There was really nobody to call. So they had to They had to look inside. They brought like a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and they followed everything that said in there, and it was like all actually fine and hunky dory. It worked out pretty well. But sometimes it is good to know some basic laws in situations like that. So you should just know that the body should be on the floor. We don't bury a body on the first day of Yom Tiv, but you could bury the body on the second day of Yom Tiv, second day of the holiday. Chabad does not do that, but many others do, and they'll even drive to the cemetery. Big Chassidim, yeah, they'll drive to the cemetery on the second day of Yom Tiv and bury a body. But you shouldn't have to know. Lo Aleinu, we shouldn't have to know such things. All right. I wish you all a good rest of the day, and we'll pick up with this halacha next week. See you guys.
Thank you.
Sure.